It's always helpful to have a common lexicon. So if you call me Administrator Fugate, I feel like I'm at a hearing raising my hand, so I go by Craig. The second thing is I refer to folks in the aftermath of disaster as survivors, not victims. Victims are the ones we lost, but the rest of them are survivors, and there's a reason why I do that. And three, the public's a resource, not a liability. And that's easy to say, but not always clearly understood what I'm talking about. But if you look at what we do in disaster response, and there I can see from the patches and the logo wear a variety of organizations that provide direct services to those survivors in the aftermath of disasters, is this tendency from my profession to look at the public as somebody we must take care of. We must guide, we must direct, we must help, and it's like it's we doing everything. It never starts out with an assumption that perhaps the public actually has a greater role in this. And not so much just, they can take care of themselves, they actually are a resource. I also realized that I am now age challenged because in one of our famous bloggers in the room, when I did one of these things where I held up my phone and said, this is now a tricorder, and he didn't know what I was talking about because he never saw Star Trek back in the 60s, is that this is a data sensor. And this proliferation of these data centers and the density of these data centers throughout the world, not just in the US, but throughout the world, means that when disaster strikes, oftentimes the first information coming out of there, and information can be a text, a phone call, a video, a picture, is going to come from somebody who's not a trained, organized, card-carrying member of the incident command community who's been certified and blessed and authorized to take care of people. Meaning, we don't trust them because they're not one of us. And the information they send us may be treated with suspect, they may be seen as somebody who's trying to spoof the system. Of course, I figure if you're shooting video of your house burning down in an area where I know there's wildfires, that's good enough for me. Especially when you have 3 different people shooting at it from 3 different angles. That's a pretty good hoax to pull on the system. So in 15 minutes or less, what am I going to talk about? And that is, do not focus on the technology, the tools, or all of the gizmos. Focus on what the outcome we're trying to achieve is. And understand, these are merely tools. There is a danger in looking at technology that sometimes we lose sight in trying to perfect to use the technology. We forget why we were trying to use it in the first place. And social media's biggest power, as I see, is to empower the public as a resource, as part of the team, not as victims that must be taken care of. And so when I look at out across the room and you guys that are tweeting and typing as fast as you can in an air-conditioned room with lights and connectivity, how do we translate that into that we're figuring out how to best deploy these tools to empower the public? Because in most disasters, and even in most emergencies, when you actually get back and you comb through all the reports and all of the data, who actually got to those survivors first? Other survivors, neighbors, bystanders, family members, right? We often talk about the response and responders as oftentimes what I call the government-centric approach to problem solving, and we forget disasters don't hit government, they hit communities. I mean, it took us a while to get people to understand that a government-centric approach isn't going to really be successful if we don't embrace the volunteer and faith-based communities and community groups as part of that team. And then we got smart and realized, last time I checked, we're not really good at doing retail food distribution or setting up bulk water systems or other things. There's other folks that do that every day called the private sector. And in many cases, they have a better, more elegant solution, and we have to change the conversation to what can we do to get you open instead of me trying to set up a parallel system. And it's really getting people to understand that this team, this dynamic of disasters, is one that, yes, government has important roles, but so does the volunteer, faith-based, community-based organizations who oftentimes may not have disasters, such as my partner in the Red Cross or even Salvation Army, may not have disasters as a core mission, but have capabilities to plug in, and oftentimes have not been socialized, worked, or had this experience, but are a resource. How do we plug them in? The private sector, which I keep trying to tell people, I love this term, public-private partnership, kill it. Let's talk about the team. We got to figure out how we leverage both the government and the private sector resources to change outcomes, effectively working as a team. Not merely something that's a contractual relationship where we're buying services, or we have some high level, we're talking, but nothing's really happening because we're not really figuring out how to get things done. And then the fourth part of this team that I think, we're using social media, but all right, everybody loves their buzzwords.